doing?
Everything's great. It's great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we are doing this, Joe,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, it's Joe Dimino. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, you got such an interesting mix of things going on here that all seem to come together so well. And before we get into that, I want to know 4 years ago, we were all grappling with this pandemic. How are we going to get out of it? All the ramifications. Ultimately, how did you make it through that time period? And how has it changed the way that you approach work now?
The pandemic was a very interesting time because right before the pandemic happened, I was traveling for the first time to the US from India with my husband, who'd been here before for his postgrad. So, and I was 1 week into it, and then all the shutdown and everything happened. So, my husband and we got stuck in a country here for 6 months because India also shut down its borders and like very few flights were coming in and going. So, and we lived here. Here is Boston, Cambridge.
Okay.
And it was I mean, there were challenges because we were earning at that time in rupees and then spending in dollars, which was a lot. The exchange rate is crazy. But there were, a lot of uncertainty and yet, like if we kept those things aside, like it was a great time for us. We realized this was a great place to be stuck in. And that, and then when we went back, we came back in like 7, 8 months we made a permanent move here. So in
Wow.
some ways, being stuck here, that pandemic just helped us make a life decision that may not have happened. So that's an interesting story I always remember about the pandemic. Um, it was, and to answer your question, yes, it was hard. Like for everyone in many different ways, being stuck at home, not getting to meet people physically. And I think for me as an introvert, it was not as hard to begin with. But even I reached a point, when it felt like, God, I want to see people when I'm going to the grocery store, and I don't want to just see people with masks.
Yeah.
I found that the most like, even when I'm just looking at people smile. And now with all those masks at that time, you could not for a couple of years, right? Um, but you get through it, you hang on, and I'm glad that we are back to normal and we can appreciate what a beautiful thing that is to just look at people, make eye
Yeah.
contact, see their facial expressions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all the little things. So you got an interesting mix of being an executive coach, a therapist, and an author. So I want to get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. So I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career
Mm-hmm.
day, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Oh, I love how you put that question. Well, I would say I work with people. I ask them questions that helps them understand and know themselves better, understand and know their strengths, what do they want, what is the life they want to live, what is important to them, and what are things they don't like. I help people understand and know themselves better at a deeper level, those things. And then that understanding and knowledge allows them to make choices and decisions in life so that they're actively creating the life they want to live and
Yeah.
not just living by default. So I would say that that's what I'm trying to do in all those different roles.
So take me back to your childhood and what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream?
That's well, it's crazy. I used to watch movies and would see, psychiatrists or therapists, and somehow that fascinated me that, oh, you could help people understand themselves. So it may sound like, oh, and then that's what I became, but it was not a linear path. So when I was a child, it really fascinated me to help people understand themselves better and like figure out what makes them happy. And I thought, oh, that is so cool. That's what I wanted to do. But it was also because I had a personal experience where I felt like growing up that nobody understood me very well.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand myself well. And I grew up in a small town in India. So we didn't have access to therapy. Like nobody had access to therapy or things like that. But when I saw that in movies, it really fascinated me. So it was at the back of my mind. But that's not where I ended after I finished my college. I just ended up doing an MBA in marketing and I loved writing. So I went and became a business journalist for 4 5 years. I did that and I burnt out badly. And when I burnt out is like I had to step away from work completely for an year. So I took that year and went back studying more on the side. And my undergrad was in psychology because I was fascinated. So I did study that. So I went back after the burnout to do more courses. And after that year, I realized, that is what I always wanted to do. And that's what I'm going to do. So I did that for close to 7 8 years, and then a friend of mine who was training to be a coach in the US asked
Yeah.
me to be her guinea pig for coaching, to for her to practice. And the work that she did with me was like, just I had so many breakthroughs. It blew my mind that how powerful and how like useful the tool was. And I was like, wow, that's what now I want to offer to my clients. So I kind of went back, retrained as a coach. So now I'm a full-time coach and I have my company, The Wellbeing Ways, and that's what I do
Okay. So who's been a hero? Who's been an inspiration for you in your work?
in my work.
Well, and probably in general, I think the Venn diagrams would probably blend together. So overall, who's been that inspiration or hero for you?
Well, I would say like there are a lot of people in different, times in my life, but I think when I was growing up, it was my parents, my mom and dad, again, because where I grew up back in India, women were not given um really access to education very easily, especially higher education, or told like, oh, you can have a career. So I think in some ways my mother herself, because she never worked in her life, she was never given that chance, but that's why it was very important to her. And she always told me that you need to have a career. And I am so grateful because without that, to me it was so normal to think about how important it is to have a career. And I probably didn't value it for a long time. I just took it for granted that that's what people do, parents do, till I went back and looked at my cousins and even the generation next to me. They didn't have that. And so definitely, my mother and father were the biggest inspiration, I would say.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating that might help you in your career or just somebody that you would love to see how they operate, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Wow, that's what if I have a antithesis? Not
Yeah.
someone who will directly inspire me, but there's something. I have a theory about people who do the not good things, people who scam others, or who I and they're looked in a certain way. And I'm not trying to justify, but I feel like often people like that are very insecure people. And I
Yeah.
would probably would love to write a book on them once at some point of time. So I would love to meet, people like Sam Bankman-Fried or Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious. I'm
Yeah.
just perpetually curious. I want to know what was going on with them, what was going on in their head that like they kept doing. And my theory is they started with a good intention, and they were like, oh, this is just a small thing, a pivot till we get that good thing done. And you keep doing that small, 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 you're just crossing that line again and again and again and again, and then you suddenly probably find yourself. And I feel like it comes from a place that in a society we are focusing so much emphasis um the just the external success, how fast you get it, how fast you get there, how big you get there, and not so much about it's okay to fail. Like You, like when you fail 10 times, 11th time you will succeed.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a yeah, it's more of a structural problem than just people problem. And I would love to kind of meet them and find out what was going on in their head.
That is fascinating. That is such a great answer. So I'm curious with you, with, especially being a writer, what was the first book for you that really captivated you, that made you want to write or made you love reading?
Wow, okay. That is taking me back a few decades. I probably don't remember the exact name of the book, but I remember the author, and I was in my school days, I was into novels, and I got my hands on Sydney Sheldon. So probably not the answer that you were expecting. Um, yeah, and Dan Brown. I think I started with Sydney Sheldon, but it was the Dan Brown series that like really got me hooked on to reading books which were not for studying.
Yeah.
uh, and then just being captivated into a world like you could literally imagine what was going on just by reading words. I think that was really fascinating,
Yeah.
and that's why like early in life I always thought, oh, I would love to write a novel.
Yeah. For sure. So, what is the inspiration for you every day to wake up to do the work that you do? You're giving a lot to help people get to a better place. You really have to get into some heavy things. What is that inspiration for you? And then to also hold enough back to evolve yourself as a human.
Well, I think what is the most motivating thing for me is just seeing people how they grow. So they say, oh, they come with something challenging. Like people will come and, I find this part of my job very hard to be kind of dealing with a lot of people, and I don't know how to handle the conflict. It's annoying. I don't want to be in a conflict. You work with them for a few weeks or a few months, and you see them grow, something that they thought was impossible, and then it becomes their nature, and they're doing it so easily. And then it's human brain, they forget how tough it was. They're like, yeah, but this is not as tough. Now they have moved on to the next goal. And I remind them always, and I have these every 6 months, I have these reviews, and I have written down what they have come with, and it's the most amazing thing, when I have those conversations, those reviews, and people are like, wow, if you didn't have this written, I would not have thought I have made this progress, and because this has become so easy now.
Yeah.
So I think just seeing people kind of growing, I I cannot, it just lights me up.
Yeah.
So that that definitely is, and learning and growing is a value for me as well. So definitely, yeah, it helps me grow
Yeah.
myself.
So you had this dream of and seeing it in movies with therapy, but when it became real, what were some of the biggest revelations that you got about this field that maybe because we romanticize things and
Yes.
we see this vision of things, but then when it becomes real, what were some of the things that you really had to deal with and figure out to get into a comfort of this profession that you've dedicated your life to?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Joe. And I don't think anybody has asked me that before. So thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I think, and that exactly when I was seeing it in the movies, it's all about the therapist.
Hmm.
Like they are so good, they understand and they know when the person comes what the problem is, and or at least that's what I grew up watching it at that time. And I was like, wow, I would want to be that person who knew what's going on with people. Truth cannot be further away. Um, as a therapist and even as a coach, I think what makes you brilliant and better than average is when you don't assume that you know more. And I always described this earlier, even when I was a therapist, and I think it's true even now that I'm a coach, that my role is more of a detective. I'm like this Sherlock Holmes. I'm curious, I'm perpetually curious, and I help bring that curiosity to that person for themselves.
Yeah.
And when you're curious, when you're looking at the problem, not from an assumption that, oh, how to solve it, it sounds very contradictory. It sounds counterintuitive that, oh, a lot of my training was focused towards not think about solving the problem. Just stay curious, just stay with whatever they're talking about the problem, hold them long enough, and the things will reveal itself. The solution, the actions, the way forward will reveal itself. So it's kind of sounds very contradictory, but that's what I think. The reality is that the therapist is just there as a, you know, observer, not somebody who's telling them what to do, not somebody who knows about the other person better than themselves, but just a curious person. And they don't look at that person's life from a certain story. That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
They're just looking at it very objectively and asking questions that helps them know themselves better, understand themselves better, and kind of find all these stuff about themselves.
So how have you been able to acquire that skill to separate what you hear from clients, which can be very heavy and can get in your brain, and then being a clinician, being somebody that's in a therapy, the therapeutic arts of helping them get to a better place. How do you separate those and keep it from getting in the way of your objectivity? How do you do that?
Right. So I would just change a little bit there. So I am last few years, 5 years, 6 years, I'm just a full executive coach.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will speak from that space. But even when I was a therapist, I think it's so easy to get caught up in the story and start looking at the story, but it's a skill that you acquire over a period of time. And my answer to that first part of that question is that I really am grateful to that coach training that I had. Honestly, when I was getting trained as a coach, I thought, oh, I've always been a therapist, so this would be easy for me. I'm just getting coaching certification so that I can coach. I'm being honest, like that.
Yeah.
I came
Yeah.
with that, but I got trained here with the Coactive Training Institute is the best coaching training institute. They are the ones who came up with the whole coaching as a field. And I think there are different principles that they kind of train you into. And that training is the best thing that happened to me in my life. And so they they kind of teach you how to just listen to the words, how to sometimes hold the words and watch the people. And are the words and the expression in sync? For example, somebody can say, that pisses me off so much, and they'll be laughing. And and in normal conversation, we may not pay attention to that. And I would ask, hey, what's going on? So is that pisses you off, but as you're saying that, you're also laughing. Or somebody will say, like, so how do you feel about this thing that's happening in their life? If I ask them a question, and they would say, it's fine. I really don't care about that. And there is something about that shrug and that tone that they're saying, I don't care. But if you don't care, you would say, yeah, I don't really care. So to listen, what's being said, listen to what's being said, and also listen to what's not being said.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the most amazing thing that
Yeah.
I learned in my coach training. And it has helped me in my life as well, not just like in coaching sessions, to kind of actually be more observant to people. It was probably something as a therapist, I was doing it, but getting more actively, consciously trained into it has definitely sharpened that skill.
I remember being a communications major in college where they said 70% of communication is nonverbal. And that's the
Yes,
thing. Most of
yes.
what you're saying is through your body movement. And I'll do that in debates. Like when I
Mhm.
really feel like something is not being said in a genuine way, you can see the blinking, you can see all of the things that are a part of, people's
Absolutely,
behaviors. Yeah.
absolutely. And the other thing to that is, and I'm just blown to like the power of silence.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just go on like they don't want to see something in their life, so they will deny and they'll keep talking and keep talking and they'll say, no, but that's not the case. And there are times I would not say anything and I'll just be silent. And then we'll just stay silent for a minute. And what it just, it's crazy that how much silence can make people come to acceptance. And they would be like, you know what? Versus if I just argued in that moment and pushed them hard to see the truth, they would push back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just these very simple things,
Yeah.
which I feel like all of us should be trained into as life skill.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. Well, I guess when I was 18 years old, I was very obsessed about how people thought about me, like whether they liked me, whether they loved me. So I think my advice will be like, don't worry about what people think of you. Don't worry about whether they think of you as smart or not smart, whether they love you or not love you. I think the most important thing is, and that is something I talk about in my book. My book is called Relationship with the Self. And I would just advise myself to just focus on how do you think of yourself? How do you treat yourself? Because when you treat yourself right, you'll end up like people will end up treating you better.
Yeah, totally.
And
So,
so yeah, that's what I would say.
yeah, that's great advice. So let me ask you this. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, wow. That's a that's a tough one. You get a lot of good advice, but I would say one of the best advice is like you're allowed to be kind of messy.
Yeah,
You're allowed to be making mistakes. You're allowed to be like sometimes losing your shit.
yeah,
Because I think I always have put myself, especially being in this profession, that, oh, so I need to be like always knowing exactly. And I think it's a lot of it is from my coach. And she told me that you're also human in the end. So you would be processing your life, your emotions, your thoughts, just like anybody else. So
yeah,
it's okay to be messy. It's okay to be,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure. So, of everything that you've done and accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, okay. So I would answer two things.
Yeah,
Again, the book. So
yeah,
it's I just had a session with somebody and they were talking about that. And I was still a therapist at that time when the idea came. And I was like, wow, I would love to write a book on this. And then things happened and I got reached out by a publisher and I wrote the book. So I am really proud of having it out in the
yeah,
world on something that probably we are not talking about enough is like how am I treating myself? How am I feeling about myself? How am I seeing myself? So I think I am really proud of that as
yeah,
my accomplishment. And the other thing is just I think I also feel a tiny bit of accomplishment every time I complete a coaching session.
yeah,
It's it's so much about, also the power of just when you hold people and just see them for who they are.
yeah,
You don't try to fix them, you don't try to solve. And it's also contradictory because people come to coaching to solve problems.
yeah,
But also the thought that I hold as a coach, the thought that we hold as good coaches is just like, you're good. I see who you are, beyond all these things that have been put, the masks or all these roles and identities that has been put beyond all those layers. I just see you for who you are, and it's good,
yeah,
whatever that is behind those layers. And so awesome how freeing it is to people and how the kind of strength that it can bring out in people and the things that they can do. So that there's that little bit of feeling, that proud moment
yeah.
every time I complete a session.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you and all these roles that you play in life. family, friends, everybody in coaching and that reads your books, but you ultimately lead the charge. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I think I'm definitely somebody who's very passionate, who's kind of like who has a lot of fire, who's very curious. Yeah, but if you think when I think of myself like, oh, what's a perception I have? I have my a perception about myself that is like I'm not someone who could just follow a path that is charted by somebody else.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
like it's just I'm somebody who likes to kind of create my own path, chart my own path, create my own way. There is something about doing stuff like that that just excites me, and I think my career has been like that. That's why I've taken different turns and arrived where I've arrived. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So if anyone wants to pick up a copy of your book, A Relationship with the Self, or hire you or reach out or any of the good business, where's the
yeah.
best place to go?
So the best place is to just send me an email at Pallavi, Pallavi, @thewellbeingways.com. But I'm also happy to give you the link to my website, which would also have the email.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put all that in the show notes, so I'll make sure that everybody's steered in the right direction. So this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for opening
Thank
up.
you,
Thank you
Joe.
for giving us a glimpse into your world, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me know when it's up.
Yes, I will. I will get links over for sure.
Thank you. It was
Thank you
lovely
again.
talking to you.
Great talking to you. Great to meet you. Take care.